The Red Sox just broke their own fan base. The latest sign, nobody cares about the NBA Finals. Caitlin Clark is back to save the WNBA from itself. All of that and a whole lot more on this edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Yes, we are off and running a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Welcome in. Lots to do. Couple of things before we get started. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you are listening on. I truly do appreciate it. And I can reveal my website. Yes, I have a website now. It is very much live. GordonDamer.com. You can find all the episodes there. You can sign up for my newsletter. Whole lot more. We'll also be adding a video component to the podcast very soon, so please check it out at GordonDamer.com. All right, on this episode, we got a blockbuster trade in Major League Baseball. We got what an NBA trade tells us about the NBA Finals. We'll touch on Caitlin Clark making her return to the court and what it tells us about where the WNBA is at. Plus, the Major League Baseball has an umpiring problem, and it's not the one you think. We got other stuff too, but let's start with the headline. And the headline is, the Red Sox just played their best baseball and they've made their latest worst decision. Yes, just as the Red Sox finally started playing some halfway decent baseball, they have made, I would have to say, their worst decision in 5 years. Boston sweeps the Yankees at Fenway Park. The ballpark this weekend was buzzing. The team, after all the issues and problems they had, clawed back over 500, back into playoff contention, and hope was in the air at Fenway. And then wham, Rafael Devers, their best player, their supposed franchise cornerstone, shipped off to the San Francisco Giants. Giants have been desperate to land a superstar for a couple of years now. They tried with Aaron Judge. They tried for Shohei Ohtani. They tried for Carlos Correa. But they finally land Devers. And when you first saw that trade, I saw it first on TikTok. And anything you see on the internet, you have to take with a grain of salt. But certainly anything you see on TikTok, you certainly have to take, oh, it's AI, it's fake, it's not real. But then I went to Twitter and I had to make sure it was Jeff Passan. It was not one of those alternate accounts, those fraud accounts that was trying to spread disinformation. But no, it's a real trade. The Red Sox really did it. They trade away their best player, and in return, what do they get back? Well, basically a bucket of baseballs and a couple of lottery tickets, a couple of arms, one high-ceiling outfield prospect. And sure, maybe they will pan out. But, this isn't just about what they got back. What it's about really is what it says about the state of the Boston Red Sox, their front office, their ownership, and where they're at, their culture, if you will. Because this was not just a bad trade. This was a self-inflicted wound, one that was completely avoidable. And before we get into it, imagine you went to one of those games this weekend and you dropped $150, $170 on one of those god-awful yellow alternate Red Sox jerseys with Devers on the back, of course. And there's no refund for that. Sorry, there's no refund that you're getting on that one once they trade them away. So that's a brutal beat there for anybody who did that. And at least a few people did. And here's the most infuriating part. This did not have to happen. The Red Sox got rid of a problem, but it was a problem they created. They turned a fan favorite and the face of their franchise into a malcontent, not because Devers changed, but because they did. Now, we covered this on a previous episode, so we won't get into all the nitty-gritty, but just to kind of recap and walk through this disaster. After trading away Mookie Betts 5 years ago, rather than paying him, the Red Sox knew they could not allow that to happen again. The butterfly effect of that decision to allow Betts to leave has been absolutely fascinating, and you can't truly appreciate it even now because the effects are still happening, starting with this Devers deal. That the Red Sox, that contract, they basically got bullied into making that contract. They gave Devers the monster deal, 10 years, $315 million, just to say, hey, look, we don't trade away all our franchise players. That Mookie Betts thing, that just happened to be a weird situation where we weren't going to be able to get true value for him, so we had to trade him away before he became a free agent. But the Devers deal, that's face of the franchise type money. That's you're our guy. And the Red Sox thought that that was the end of it. Hey, we gave you the money. Now do whatever we say. And those days in baseball, in professional sports, especially at that level, $300 million, are over. When you enter into a contract like that, it's not a one-way street. It's a relationship. That contract told Devers, hey, you're the guy. But what did they do after making him the guy? They chased Alex Bregman behind his back. Didn't tell Devers a thing. Didn't loop the guy in. Just gave him a franchise-defining deal and then went out and tried to find somebody to replace him at his position. They lied to him about it at the time, and then they signed Bregman and told him, okay, you're the DH. Put away your glove. You're going to be the DH from now on. And then halfway through the season, when Cassis gets hurt at first base, they go back to him and say, hey, you know what? Actually, would you like grabbing a first baseman's mitt and you go over there and figure it out? Mind you, a position he has never played on the fly mid-season. And the reason why he's not the third baseman is he's not a good defender. And that's the position that he's played his entire career. And when he turns down the team and doesn't want to screw up in a new position in a playoff race after being told, hey, we don't need your glove anymore, he's the bad guy. Now, maybe Devers was petty and bitter, but this relationship went wrong based on the steps made by the Red Sox, not by Devers. They treated Devers like a piece of office equipment. Just sit there and produce and don't speak unless spoken to. They made it into a one-way relationship, and now that that bridge is burned, they're trying to sell you this idea that Devers was selfish, that he didn't want to sacrifice for the team. You don't get to preach sacrifice when you're the ones who initially poisoned the relationship. You're the ones who failed to communicate, and you built this mess with your own two hands. And let's not forget, they're the ones who signed him to this deal, 2 years ago? If Devers was such a clubhouse cancer, if he was such a me-first diva, then why on earth would you have handed him $300 million? Did he suddenly become a problem after he cashed the check? Or did you, once again, mismanage a star player just like you did with Mookie Betts? Because let's be honest, that Betts trade broke this franchise. It broke the trust that fans have with it. It broke the competitive direction of the organization, and it looks like this new regime has learned absolutely nothing from that deal. And this feels a lot like Mookie Betts 2.0, except this time, the Red Sox didn't have the excuse of not being able to afford him because they already paid him. They're the ones who handed him the contract and then soured on the relationship and dumped him mid-season for pennies on the dollar. So now what? Now is it back to a rebuild? Is it playing the kids and talking about the future and showing off the farm system? Good luck selling that to your fans, because maybe they were gullible enough to buy one of those yellow Devers jerseys, but buying good faith from an organization who has repeatedly burned you, that's not going to be as easy a sell. And it's clear Red Sox fans are paying attention, because this is not just a baseball move. This was a flashing neon sign that the organization still does not get it. Now, I'm not saying that this trade is all downside for the Red Sox. Red Sox at least have the possibility of options down the road after removing that money from their payroll that they were going to be basically paying to a DH. And it's not like Devers is some big winner here either. He might be getting out of Boston, but this trade isn't a huge victory for him either. Because while the Giants are going to be thrilled to have him and have legit power bat in the middle of their lineup, that ballpark is where home runs go to die. Since the start of last season, it has been the toughest baseball park to hit a ball out of, and it is brutal on lefties. So the Giants have the third most home runs from right-handed hitters this year, but when it comes to lefties, second fewest in all of baseball. And that's not a coincidence. That is a direct reflection of the ballpark that they play in. And how's this for a stat? San Francisco has not had a 30 home run hitter since Barry Bonds in 2004. So over 20 years, the longest active drought in baseball. The next longest, that one didn't start until 2019. So yeah, Devers could break that streak. He certainly got pop. He's already hit 30 or more 3 times, and he's halfway there this season. But let's not kid ourselves either. The move that San Francisco made is going to slow down his power numbers. That ballpark is different. It's cold there a lot of the year. It's windy, and that outfield is massive. Now, to be fair, Fenway was not exactly a launching pad for him either. Devers actually hit more home runs on the road than at Fenway during his time in Boston. But when Fenway steals home runs, it gives you doubles. It gives you offense. That's not happening in San Francisco. You're not getting those cheap doubles off the wall. You're hitting into a deep, cavernous gap where doubles die, and the warning track power is not exactly great either. So this trade might be a fresh start and maybe even some short-term relief for Devers, who looked absolutely miserable for a while, but it's not exactly a dream scenario either. Statistically, his numbers are probably going to take a dip. Now, he's going to be the best hitter they've had since Buster Posey. He's just that talented. But don't be surprised if the box score does not totally reflect it. But that's just a sidebar. To me, this is not about Devers, really. It's not about the Giants, really. This trade is about where the Red Sox ownership and front office are at and how they have not learned the lessons of 5 years ago. They completely butchered this relationship. And the way you know between winners and losers who the real loser is, anytime people wonder about that, about a signing or a trade, there's a simple thought exercise to bottom line it. What would my biggest rival want me to do? In this case, what would the other teams in the American League East want me to do? And when you look at it through that prism, well, it's pretty simple. The Red Sox are the biggest loser out of this whole scenario. The Yankees are thrilled that Devers is out of the American League East, and they don't have to see him again unless they play the Giants in a couple of years. And even though he's out for the season, Garrett Cole is probably celebrating somewhere with his arm in a sling. So look, maybe this Devers trade won't turn into the full-blown disaster that the Mookie Betts deal became. That was a once-in-a-generation type screw-up. But once again, the Red Sox have taken a superstar under team control, someone they chose to commit to long-term, and someone they've had in the organization for years, and they completely mismanaged the relationship until the only option was to dump him mid-season like a bad contract. And all the while, the team is playing their best baseball of the season. And that's really the point. This franchise didn't learn a thing from the Betts debacle. Different front office, same dysfunction. Different contract, same careless handling of a star. So maybe it won't turn out to be as bad as Mookie, but make no mistake, it might not have the same ending, but it's the same movie. It's the same script. All right, one more thing about the Devers deal, now that I think of it, and how it makes the Boston ownership look terrible. Not only did they trade away the star, they didn't pay any of his future contract. So when you do that, you get back a worse package, right? If they were to be willing to pick up some of the money, Giants probably would have allowed them to have some better prospects in the deal. So it's clear that the Red Sox ownership wanted out of not just the player and the problems, but the money. And for a team like Boston to be acting like a small market team, man, that has got to be absolute poison for a fan base that's dealt with some poison the last 5 years. All right, let's move on to the big NBA trade that happened over the weekend. Desmond Bane goes from Orlando to the Memphis Grizzlies. Grizzlies get back 4 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. And the latest big deal with a bunch of draft picks involved. And all you needed to know about how this year's NBA Finals are not connecting with the casual fan, look at how much attention this trade got at a time when the trade went down. The Finals are not just going on, they were tied at 2 games apiece. Think about any other league that would allow a big trade to come in and steal the spotlight from the championship round. Could you imagine a trade in the NFL being announced during the Super Bowl? Alex Rodriguez was a pariah, not for signing during the World Series, for opting out of his contract during the World Series. I don't care about the TV ratings because I'm an actual NBA fan. The casuals, though, this series just does not rate with them. And really, the NBA shouldn't be all that focused on ratings either because their TV deal is done, right? For like the next 9-10 years. But it's not a shock. The NBA is a star league. And it's not just star players. It's star names that drive the attention. And this series just does not have those star names that are recognizable to the casual fan. When you build your league on star power, that's the downside. Now, if the Thunder are going to be competing for titles and fans know SGA year in and year out as an MVP level type player, that will change. But at least in the right now, this series is for the diehards, not the casuals. Now, as for the trade, I think this is one of the rare times where both sides might end up being losers in the deal. Now, I'll start with Orlando because at least I understand their mindset of this trade. This is a team that has leaned into patience, right? They have built this thing slow, they've stockpiled picks, and they've developed their talent. But with this move, they've changed that. They have cashed in the assets, and they're now deep into the tax, and they're staring at a future where nearly, I think, 80% of their cap space is going to be tied up in just 3 guys by 2027. But I get it, because rarely does the perfect trade present itself. And at some point, you got to take your shot. The Magic were a playoff team this year. They want to take that next step. And this is a bet, not just on Bane, but on everyone else, the big pieces on the roster, on Banchero making that next leap, from Franz Wagner turning into a two-way star and staying healthy for both those guys. Because unless that happens, locking yourself into this cap situation with these players to maybe compete in a wide open Eastern Conference, to me, is a huge risk, but I get why they're taking that risk at this time. The other side of the deal is far more intriguing to me, because for the Grizzlies, this trade is not just about the present, but it kind of opens up some options and makes it a much bigger question where they go from here. Because they move a really good player for a boatload of picks, and they take on some salary in the short term, but what matters, they just bought themselves some options. And depending on how bold they really want to be, this is the moment where they could pick a direction and really go for it. Because right now, they're in no man's land. They're in between. They're not good enough to compete with the top teams out west, and they're certainly not terrible either. But now they have an off-ramp from the middle of the road pack, because they got all their first-round picks. They got Orlando's pick. They got Phoenix's pick next year. And then they still have some 2 major pieces that if they wanted to flip, they could really pick a direction and set themselves up for the long term if they're willing to be patient. They could move Jaren Jackson Jr., who when healthy is a max level type player. He's one of the best defenders in the league. And at his current contract, he could fit on any contender's cap. And if you want to cash in, now would be the time. You could get another haul of unprotected picks and just kind of keep stacking that war chest the way that OKC did. And then there's the big decision on Ja Morant, which clearly is a tougher call because the talent is elite and we've seen it. But between the injuries and more importantly, the off the court stuff, is that a guy that you want to be investing long-term in? It seems like he's just one more bad decision away from something really bad going down. And I don't know that I want him on my team when that happens. But look, you got a bunch of organizations that are desperate looking for that star. And if a team believes that, they can manage the risk and they want to gamble on the upside because it's still there, well, by all means, have at it. So if you make both those moves, the Grizzlies would control a stockpile of assets. And they would be sitting on a trove that would let them rebuild from scratch with more flexibility than Houston had. They didn't even start with a franchise player. Now, the Grizzlies wouldn't either, but they'd have way more picks and a front office that has proven they've done a pretty good job of finding talent. They drafted Bane at 30? They found value in the second round. And this might be the perfect moment to go all in on a full rebuild because the West is loaded. And look, nobody wants to tank, but the timing might be right because it's never been easier to lose in the West. And by removing Bane, it makes it even easier to lose in the West. So the question for the Grizzlies is, what do they actually want? Maybe they plan to just be a little bit more diversified and build out the roster and build out the depth and run it back with Durant and Jackson. But I get the feeling more big moves are coming down the pike. And their GM, Zach Kleiman, he might have the job security kind of pull that off. He's built this one thing once before. He's still young. He already made the move to fire Tyler Jenkins midseason. That's not something you would do unless you've got the trust of ownership, you would think. Because if they're honest with themselves, they're looking up on the Thunder. The T-Wolves are there. The Nuggets are still there. And they kind of have to wonder where they stack up, even being optimistic, especially in a Western Conference where the ceiling of this core, I think, has already been reached. The NBA offseason is generally the most fascinating part of the entire calendar year, and it's certainly shaping up that this year is going to be the same, and Memphis might be the biggest player of the bunch. All right, let's move on to 3 and Out. And Caitlin Clark made her return over the weekend, and boom, just like that, WNBA highlights were back on my timeline. Hadn't seen them in a few weeks, but all of a sudden, look who's back, and they were right there on Twitter, on Instagram, on everything. And listen, I don't want to be that guy, but the league should not need any more evidence by now that Caitlin Clark is not a draw. She is the draw. I know the term unicorn gets thrown around way too often, but she truly is. She has done something no marketing campaign, no media partnership, no amount of money, no playoff format has been able to do in 20 plus years, and that is make the WNBA relevant to more than just the diehard fan. But here's the problem. The league still has not figured out how to take this once in a lifetime gift and turn it into something more than just a one-person thing. Because the numbers with Clark out were absolutely brutal. According to Nielsen, WNBA viewership was down 55% nationally. And for her team, the Fever, those games specifically were down 53%. One player goes down and the ratings fall off a cliff. And that's not just a ratings dip. That is a red flag. That's a neon sign that says, you know what? We didn't actually build any WNBA fans. There are Caitlin Clark fans, yes, for sure. But when she wasn't playing, people stopped watching. Half of the people stopped watching. No league wants to be this dependent on one player, and you would hope over time the WNBA will be able to figure out ways to get people, the casual fan, more interested in just than Caitlin Clark. I don't know, maybe if she gets hurt again, just run her highlights in a smaller box on the screen while the other games are going on. I'm not sure. And every league relies on stars. And right now, the WNBA is still a one-engine plane. And when that engine went out, so did a lot of the audience right out the window. So this should be a sign to league executives. Whatever their plan is, it is not working. They are not building anything. She's building something, but whatever their plan is to this point, it is not a good plan. Because if the plan is, hey, just cross your fingers and hope Caitlin Clark never gets hurt again, that doesn't seem like a real viable plan. So when this season is over, those executives got to go back to the drawing board. All right, number 2, let's talk about what's quickly, at least for me, becoming one of the bigger storylines of the baseball season. And it's not about Aaron Judge or what's going on with the Dodgers. It's the umpires again. And look, I get it. Complaining about umpires or referees or officials is nothing new. It's basically part of the fan experience these days. But I think it's rooted in a deeper issue that baseball still hasn't figured out how to fix. Now, look, by the numbers, umpires are actually better now than they've ever been before. I know that doesn't seem like the case. The margin of error has shrunk. The bad calls are less frequent, but the perception of umpiring has never been worse. Part of it is because there's a couple of umpires who are historically bad, but Major League Baseball just can't seem to get rid of them. But mostly it's because technology now shows us everything. The strike zone is on your screen in real time. Social media has slow-mo replays after every single pitch. And the moment an umpire blows a call, you know what's going to happen? It's going to be clipped and shared online and dissected 1,000 times before the next inning even starts. And when you throw in the gambling aspect, real money on the line, you've got a whole new level of frustration from fans, and every missed call feels extra personal. But the other area where this is a real problem is ejections. Baseball has a very real problem there. Already this season, there have been 74 ejections in Major League Baseball. Does that seem high to anybody else? 74 ejections. What other sport has 74 ejections in an entire season? But with baseball, it's just part of the deal. We've just all come to just kind of expect it. And where do a large portion of those ejections come from? Balls and strikes. It's not brawls. It's not bench clearing incidents. Baseball's the only sport where officials can toss a player or a coach on a whim. Other leagues have warning systems, right? In the NBA, you got to get a tech. In soccer, what is it, yellow card? Football, hockey, you basically have to be trying to physically injure someone to get banned there. But in baseball, you look at the ump the wrong way, boom, you're gone. And it happens on an every night basis. And this is not exactly breaking any new ground here, but fans don't come to the ballpark to watch backups. If you go to Broadway, you want the star to be in the show. You don't want them to be removed because they had a questionable rehearsal. And I know they say you just simply cannot argue balls and strikes, but whatever that plan is right now, it's not working. It's way too arbitrary. It's way too quick. And the power imbalance, at least for me, is kind of hurting the game. I don't understand why the technology is there in every other sport, but Major League Baseball can't seem to get it right. So fix the strike zone, fix the ejection rule, and give fans the game and the stars that they show up to watch. And don't make it one where the outcome is decided by an umpire's bad day or hurt feelings. Because most time that these ejections take place, you go back and look at it later, the manager, the player are in the right. So why don't we have more focus on getting the calls right in the first place? All right, then finally, number 3, 2 of the most clutch performances of 2025. I think we're halfway through of 2025 already. Sunday, you got J.J. Spawn and his 64-foot putt to win the U.S. Open. And then Monday, Gage Wood. That's a great baseball name. Gage Wood of Arkansas throws the first no-hitter in college baseball World Series since 1960. Now, the talk was he was going to be a first-round pick anyway. I'm guessing with that performance, he is now locked in at least in the first round, and who knows, maybe in the top 10 of the first round. And then you have Spawn, who completely changed his life with a single putt. I don't generally care for the U.S. Open because the course is the star, right? They usually make the course at the Open so ridiculously tough that, and the conditions on Sunday made it an absolute joke, that it felt like coming down the stretch, it was not going to be that the winner was truly deserving. It was more of just who got lucky. So the fact that he hit that putt, and maybe it was just a lucky putt, but the fact that he hit that putt at the time, at least it felt like, hey, we got at least one memorably good shot after so many memorably bad shots, and a memorable shot that not only will we see again, we will see it again every year that the U.S. Open for as long as we live. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of the podcast. Again, hit that subscribe button, check out GordonDamer.com, and we will see you next time, only right here on Gordon Damer on Sports.